Welcome to Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast. Our goal is to keep you informed, inspired, and a little entertained on all things diabetes. The information contained in the program is based on the experience and opinions of the Integrated Diabetes Services clinical team. Since this is a very individualized condition, please check with your healthcare provider before implementing any of the weird stuff we may happen to share with you today. I'm your host, Gary Scheiner, owner and clinical director of Integrated Diabetes Services. I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 39 years. And today we're going to be discussing weight management for people who take insulin. And I'm delighted to be joined today by somebody who is completely on the other side of the globe. I mean, if we drilled a hole through, we would find South Africa, and that's where our special guest is from, Dr. Paula Diab. Paula is a physician and diabetologist in South Africa, and she runs an accredited diabetes center of excellence. So Paula, welcome to the program. Tell us a little more about yourself.
Thank you, Gary. I suppose, as you said, the most important thing to note about me is that I'm not in the US. So while we're chatting, the sun might set and it might get a bit dark. I do get very passionate about things and I talk very fast. So if I do that, then hopefully I'll calm myself down and talk a bit slower. That's where my accent comes from. But I've been working in the field of diabetes for about 20 years. I graduated with my basic medical degree at the University of Cape Town in the year 2000. And I specialized in diabetes. I did my PhD. I've recently qualified as a diabetes care and education specialist. But I think my real passion is just translating what I know about diabetes into a very simple and usable and user-friendly form for the everyday person. Because I think, Gary, you'll agree with me, as clinicians, we, especially these days, we can get information really at our fingertips all the time. And almost on a daily basis, there's new information, new research, new evidence coming out. But the flip side of that is that it's also available to the everyday person on social media and on the internet. But from experience, I often find that people tend to get the wrong end of the stick sometimes. Sometimes that message is a little tarnished, and quite a lot gets lost in translation. So I really enjoy translating that for people and putting it into a user-friendly form.
And one of the bigger challenges any of us has who lives with diabetes is in trying to manage our weight. Now, insulin it's a growth hormone. Insulin not only causes our cells to absorb glucose, but it causes fat cells to absorb fuel and enlarge. So the more insulin we take, the more fat we're going to store, and the heavier we tend to get. So on one end of this, we're trying to manage our glucose levels, and we have to take insulin to do that, knowing that insulin is also promoting weight gain. The first rule is we've got to manage our diabetes. We've got to manage the glucose levels. But doing that at the same time as we're trying to lose weight is really challenging. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly diabetes is one of those hormonal diseases that affects our ability to lose and gain weight. Thyroid disease is another one where you're having to take hormones in order to make your thyroid operate at the right level. Menopause is another one that affects women when their hormones go upside down. And these are what we call environmental influences on our weight. But I think there's a lot more to weight, and certainly the latest research is showing that weight and obesity management, in fact, weight is now classified as a disease. And I can expand on that in a bit of detail just now. But it's a disease that is able to be treated, and it's largely genetically motivated, but influenced by these hormonal and environmental issues. So absolutely correct. We need to monitor our how much insulin you're taking, or what level of thyroid hormone you're taking, or your reproductive hormones that you might need to replace. But when they're not in the right balance, then that is certainly going to make you gain weight.
When I was in grad school, endocrinology to me was so appealing and so interesting because of the interplay. one thing affects another thing, which affects another thing, which affects another thing, and then it cycles all over again. The hormone balances in the body are just incredibly fascinating. And, the hormones that affect weight in particular, things like leptin and ghrelin, and then, insulin and thyroid hormone and growth hormone. These hormones have an interplay. It's like a ballet going on in the background all the time. What motivates me to keep my weight under control is cheapness and laziness. It's not really a vanity thing, and it's not a health thing. What motivates me is I don't want to have to go out and buy new clothes that are bigger than the ones I've got. So everyone out there, I think, has their own motivation for why they want to keep their weight under control. What motivates you to keep your weight down?
I've got a very strong family history of diabetes, and I've often said to you, I feel like a little bit of a pariah in IDS because I don't have type 1 diabetes. I'm the outsider.
We're thinking for the holidays this year, we might give you diabetes as a present.
Thanks.
Give them diabetes.
But yeah, I mean, I have a very strong family history of type 2 diabetes, and I had gestational diabetes, and my mom had gestational diabetes. So I think for me, it's an intellectual knowledge of the complications and the potential things that can go wrong. I'm perhaps fit more into that category of working moms who don't really have a huge amount of time to spend at the gym and doing a lot of exercise. But at the same time, I also don't restrict myself with what I'm eating. I obviously make food for the family and I try and make that well balanced. But if it's a Friday night and we want to go out and have pizza, I'm going to go and have a pizza. It's just not every night and every Friday night that you go. So I think, again, one of the things that I find that people can really relate to is that I have a very practical way of approaching life. I don't spend hours and hours at the gym. I don't spend hours and hours cooking these beautiful homemade vegetable soups and never eating pizza. It's just simple. Look after yourself 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you can go. But
our colleague on our team, Jenny Smith, taught me that. The 4 out of 5 rule, she calls it. It's like, 4 out of 5 dentists surveyed recommend sugarless gum. I always wanted to know who was the one dentist that didn't recommend sugarless gum for his patients. She said, 4 out of 5 of your meals, you should try to eat reasonably healthy. 1 out of 5, don't worry about it. Enjoy yourself. And I really take solace in that. We don't have to be perfect all the time.
And I think on that note, I think that's what makes us different as humans. One thing when I'm explaining how our bodies react to weight loss and weight gain is I always paint the picture of a lion in the bush. Now, I know there's not a whole bunch of lions roaming around the States, but I think everyone knows what lions are like.
Africa, you got lions to deal with. I get it.
You've got lions to deal with. Not roaming around in our back gardens, but they are lions. When a lion is hungry, it goes and it looks for a buck and it catches a buck, and it's going to carry on going until it catches the buck. And then it's going to sit down or lie down and it's going to tear that buck apart until it's no longer hungry. And then when it's no longer hungry, it's going to go and lie in the shade under a tree and it's going to sit there. And if another buck comes running past, that buck is safe because the lion's now full. The difference with humans is that we eat for socialization purposes, we eat for pleasure, we eat for all sorts of different reasons. We don't just eat because we are homeostatically hungry. And in fact, we've now found that appetite is controlled in our brains in 3 different places. One is that homeostatic eating, or what drives our homeostatic eating when we say, I'm hungry, I haven't eaten for 3 days, I need to get something to eat. And that's where the lion comes in. Humans have got a hedonistic side of their brain as well, which is controlled in the frontal cortex, that animals don't have developed. And that is when you've decided that you just want to have a quiet night at home for whatever reason, and then your friend phones you and says, oh, we're all going out for pizza, do you want to come and join us? 99% of the time, you're not going to say no, unless you've got too much work to do, or you don't have the money, or there'll be another reason, but it won't be because you don't want to partake in eating that pizza. And so that is the difference as to why you get overweight humans. I don't know if the Facebook meme made it across to the States, but there's this lovely one going around with all my friends that shows a big fat hippopotamus eating grass. And it says proof that you can't lose weight by eating vegetables. That hippopotamus is not overweight. That is the hippopotamus's size.
We've got part of our brain driving us to eat out of hunger. We got part of our brain driving us to eat just for pleasure, hedonistic, whatever. Here's the wrinkle. In people with diabetes, the hunger part is not normal. I learned about 20 years ago about a hormone called amylin that's normally produced along with insulin. The beta cells put out insulin and this amylin hormone at the same time. And, we can survive and live without amylin, but amylin plays a pretty important role in regulating hunger and rate of digestion. And without it, food digests much faster than it's supposed to, and we're hungrier than we should be. So people with diabetes, type 2s and type 1s, type 2s produce very little amylin, type 1s produce none. Without that hormone, without that amylin hormone present, we're hungrier than we should be. Our food digests much faster than it should. Our stomach empties very quickly. How unfair is that? I mean, you think about a disease state where food intake is central to managing it, and now you're going to make these people hungry constantly? That's not fair. Are we really on an unfair playing field here? And is there anything we can do about it?
So certainly, I mean, absolutely. And that's why a lot of the new diabetic drugs are targeted at looking at different pathways in diabetes and not just the simple, let's give this guy more insulin, and the more food he eats, the more insulin he needs. I think when I finished university, we were still talking about 3 pathways that affected your glucose levels in your body. But we now know about 11 different pathways that influence your glucose levels. And only 1 or 2 of those is in the pancreas and 1 is in the gut. And the rest are all in all the other organs, including the brain. And what's really nice is that we now are starting to be able to offer people medication that can target all these different pathways and adapt the hormones that are influencing your hunger levels and your satiety and your ability to metabolize and your gastric emptying and how slowly or fast you metabolize food.
You see on TV and in the news, these new weight loss medications on the market, and they belong to a category called GLP-1 receptor agonists. But things like Ozempic, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Victoza, I guess these are meds that they do similar things as that amylin hormone, but they're a little longer lasting. The side effects aren't quite as substantial. So they become very popular for people trying to lose weight. In my case, I use one, not because I need to lose weight, but because it helps me control my appetite. I still enjoy food, but I'm not constantly like a lion out with an empty stomach all the time.
You mentioned a bit earlier about the hormone leptin. So one of the key things that these GLP-1s do is as soon as you stop eating, whether it's overnight, whether it's for 3 days, whether it's for, you're going on a month-long fast or whatever it is, your leptin levels start dropping. And your brain reacts to that drop in leptin by saying, I'm hungry. And that's why we often wake up in the morning and before we even thought what's happening, we're hungry. It's because those leptin levels have dropped. That all happens in our subconscious brain. That's that homeostatic part of the brain. And so it's an area of our brain that we can't access. So no matter how much you tell yourself, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, I'm not hungry, your brain is still programmed to say, you are hungry, you are hungry, you are hungry. But what the GLP-1s do is they can break that cycle at that feedback to your brain at that subconscious level. And it allows you then to differentiate, do I want to eat this? Or do I need to eat this, and make that differentiation between those 2 things?
So sleep is, I've read a lot about sleep, studied effects of sleep, and it certainly affects glucose management, but it also affects appetite and affects metabolism. Can you expand a little bit on the role of sleep in weight management?
Certainly, as you said, it affects diabetes management because a lack of sleep, your cortisol levels are going to go up because of the stress response. And cortisol obviously is an anti-insulin hormone, so your glucose levels go up. And exactly the same way in obesity or in weight management, that cortisol level that rises as you don't sleep properly affects the way in which you store glucose. And I think we're seeing this more and more in management these days, with people leading very stressful lives, not sleeping very well, having unbroken sleep, people who do shift work. In the old days, you never had a cell phone that people could call you on and message you on that beeped all night long. And all of those things are playing into our ability to have a solid 8-hour sleep every night. And that is certainly affecting the way that we can lose weight or gain weight.
Yeah, and I've read about the leptin ghrelin balance while we sleep, and interrupted sleep, poor quality, short duration sleep. It seems that those leptin levels that help us control our appetite go down, and the ghrelin levels that stimulate appetite go up. So getting quality sleep, getting a good night's sleep on a consistent basis can make a big difference.
And the other thing that plays into it is as you get bigger, you're putting more pressure on your lungs. So when you're lying flat at night, you get what's called obstructive sleep apnea. It's purely from a physical, this diaphragm pushing up pushed up against the lungs. And that also contributes to not being able to sleep properly. So it's a completely vicious cycle that we need to break at some stage.
Yeah. I guess those of us who stress eat, that would be part of that aspect of the brain that's not hunger induced. This is emotionally triggered hunger. I think we all have our go-to food. When you're stressed, what's your preferred food?
Chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate. All right. I go to the store, I get this box of things called Pop-Ums. You ever heard of these? They're like little donut holes with a glaze on them. Just thinking about them, my mouth starts to water. And the whole box is probably like, I don't know, 8 or 10 servings, but I'm eating the whole box and it's going to disappear. And when I'm stressed, it's like, I need a box of pop.
So, the interesting thing about that stress eating and what you're describing is for so many of us, I know I come home from work every afternoon, and just the way our house is designed, I have to walk through the kitchen to get anywhere in the house. And it's almost become sort of a Pavlovian response that I'll put my bag and my keys down and I'll go and open the fridge just to see what's there. I'm not hungry. I don't even know if I'm hungry. I'll just go and open the fridge just for fun, just to see what's there. And then once the fridge door is open, you think, well, now I've got to get something out this fridge. I heard a very interesting thing, and I've actually used it for a couple of patients and myself, and it works. And they say, if you can identify when you are snacking or when you are comfort eating or when you have an emotional situation that's causing you to eat too much, you only have to change 1 or 2 of those aspects in order for you to break that whole cycle. So, for example, if you used to, after dinner, as a family, going to go and sit in the lounge and watch some TV, and then suddenly you get hungry and you want to eat something. If you just don't turn the TV on, or if you go and fold the laundry first and then go and watch TV, or if you take the dog for a walk first before you go and watch TV, you've broken that entire cycle. So I now come in a different door in our house so that I don't walk directly into the kitchen and go through to the bedroom first, put my clothes, take my shoes off and do whatever I have to do, and then go into the rest of the house. And it completely breaks that cycle of going directly to the fridge.
That's a brilliant idea.
We're seeing it with a lot of people who've started working from home also, that they're often working in the dining room, lounge, living, kitchen area. It's just easy. It's too easy just to go in, and they've got into this habit of walking into the fridge and walking into the kitchen and just opening the fridge or opening the cupboard.
So simple behavioral changes can make an enormous difference. Speaking of the behavioral changes, I'm an exercise physiologist by trade, and staying in shape is kind of ingrained in me. I truly believe that mindset is essential to long-term weight management and health. All the medications in the world will only do so much. You still have to have a certain amount of willpower. You still have to adopt healthy habits. Not many people are farming and working in hard manufacturing type jobs anymore. People are, service industries and pressing buttons on machines. And
so certainly that, you mentioned not many people are farming anymore. Our bodies and our brains were designed for that active hunter-gatherer type of person.
Hunting lions.
Hunting lions. Although I don't know if I'd eat a lion.
It might be the other way around, Paula.
It might be the other way around. But that's what our bodies were designed for. And the whole hormonal aspect was designed as an anti-starvation mechanism. And now what we've done is we've got this fast food, high fat, high salt, high sugar. Your pizza gets delivered to your door. Just press a few buttons on your phone. You don't even need to go get up and get your wallet, money, press a few more buttons on your phone and you've paid for the pizza. All of that stuff has now collided with this way in which our brains are hardwired. And yeah, that's where this whole conundrum is coming in, and why people are battling with obesity so much is because it's a collision of these two worlds.
I think living in suburban and rural areas is dangerous for one's health. When people live in the city and work in the city, they walk everywhere. They're on their feet almost constantly.
Absolutely.
And I see it. When I go downtown, I don't see nearly as much overweight and obesity as I do out here, because everyone just drives every place here. It's not nearly as much foot traffic.
Well, just this weekend, we had a long weekend in South Africa. It was a public holiday yesterday, and we went away into what's called the Midlands, and it's very similar to the English Midlands, where there's lots of hills and rivers and farms and everything. And immediately I said to my husband, as we drove in, I said, I just feel so much more relaxed, and life just happens at a slower pace. And you go out for a breakfast and you can have the eggs and the bacon and the tomatoes and the onions and all the trimmings on it because you've had a hard day at work, or you're about to have a hard day on the farm. And everyone's working on their farms, and there's beautiful homemade food, and everyone's very relaxed and chilled out. Nobody's rushing around. It's wonderful. And that's not what our lifestyles are like these days.
Yeah, well, 4 out of 5 rule still applies. So, there's a few different classes of medications besides the GLP-1s, which are mostly injectables. There are some companies developing oral versions of that, so you could take it in pill form. But for now, most of those are once a week injectables, and they come in a pen where the pen needle is so tiny you don't even feel the needle stick or the injection. But there's another class of drugs called SGLT2 inhibitors. And these are oral meds that literally turn your kidneys into a sieve. You just spill sugar out through the urine constantly. And in doing so, you lose fluids as well. But when you spill sugar in the urine, you're losing calories. And normally, when our glucose levels get above 180 or 10 millimole, that happens naturally. But these medications cause you to spill sugar in the urine all the time, no matter what your glucose level is. So people can urinate away a few hundred calories a day just from taking these pills, and that facilitates weight loss. The side effects potentially, type 1s who take these can sometimes go into ketoacidosis if they're not careful, because they may not retain as much energy as they're used to. And their insulin needs may go down quite a bit. You have any thoughts about the SGLT2 meds as a weight loss tool?
Yeah, I think when they initially came out, that was one of the big marketing messages that was given. And for reasons that you've explained, they absolutely do cause weight loss. But I think for me, certainly they're not registered at this stage that I know of outside of diabetes management. So if you don't have diabetes, you can't use an SGLT2.
Assuming all our listeners have diabetes, would it also help facilitate some weight loss for them?
So it would facilitate weight loss. You obviously do need to be careful of the side effects, because it's, as you say, it's promoting that your kidneys to become a sieve and sieve out all the glucose and the extra glucose that you're not using. You end up with a bladder full of glucose. So if you are a perimenopausal woman, or if you have decreased mobility in for whatever reason, or if you're not able to void your bladder on a regular basis, you're going to end up with a beautiful place to grow a whole bunch of bacteria in your bladder. So that's going to become a problem. I think if I'm prescribing an SGLT2, I still prescribe it primarily for its cardiovascular benefits, or cardiovascular and renal protective benefits. And I tend to use it more as weight loss as a side effect. Having said that, a number of people who have type 2 diabetes, who have got cardiovascular risk factors, are often overweight as well. So it just becomes a nice added bonus, really. Yeah.
I tried one of those medications when they first came out several years ago, because I just try everything. I like to see how it actually works. And it does what it says. I was urinating a lot more than usual, and it was lowering my glucose around the clock. The odd thing about it After 35 years with type 1, when I have to pee more than usual, in my brain, that registers as bad because it means my glucose is too high. So when I started urinating more than usual, taking those meds, all I kept thinking is, this is bad. This is bad for me. My blood sugar must be high, but it could be perfectly normal. It could even be low, and I'm still urinating away glucose. So to me, the big negative side effect was having to run to the bathroom so much. It just got to be a little disruptive.
And you've got to void and empty your bladder because of that high glucose content that sits there.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do is they see that they're going to the toilet more often, so they automatically reduce their fluid intake. And that's the next worst thing that you can do because you're dehydrated.
So there's one other weight management technique or procedure that some people opt for, and that's gastric bypass. It's not something I have experience with. I've not tried it myself, and I don't know.
You haven't tried that?
I honestly don't know that I've had any patients who have done it either. You have any patients who have gone for gastric bypass?
I actually have, and it works very nicely in some patients. And I think the nicest way to think about gastric bypass surgery and sort of medication for obesity in general is to think of it like a pyramid. And right up at the top of the pyramid, you've got surgical options for weight loss management. The next layer underneath that is your medical management, so your GLP-1s and whatever other medical management you want to use. Underneath that, you've got diet and exercise, and underneath that, you've got behavioral management. So your gastric bypass surgery is not going to work if you don't have diet and exercise and all the other building blocks underneath you. It works very nicely in patients for whom it is intended, and those are generally people with a BMI of over 45 or 50 who've tried all the other levels. And what it basically does is it just reduces the size of the stomach and changes some of the metabolism and absorption of your stomach. But you need those building blocks at the bottom. So we've spoken a lot about the medical management, and you've hinted at the diet and the exercise part of things. And I always say to my patients, if you've got a patient with asthma, for example, you don't say to that patient, just breathe more deeply if they're having an acute asthma attack. You don't say to them, just take deep breaths, that's going to help you. You give them an asthma inhaler and you help their lungs to expand and to get more oxygen in. And then you say to them, okay, now I'll breathe deeply as well, and you'll get more oxygen into your lungs. And I try to encourage people to think of weight loss in that same way. Absolutely, calorie intake and output is important, and what you're eating is important, and what physical activity you're doing is important. But you are going to need, if we agree that this disease is genetically inherited and it's centered in the brain and it's hormonally driven, you are going to need that GLP-1 drug to change that feedback mechanism into your brain. But then you can't just sit back and go, okay, I've taken the medication, now I can go and eat pizza for breakfast, lunch, and supper, and I'm never going to do any exercise. You still need to have that baseline underneath. And in the behavioral therapy part of it is the understanding of, when do I snack? Why do I snack? The emotional eating, how do I curb that? All those behavioral techniques at the bottom. So if you think of it like a pyramid, for those specific people, gastric bypass surgery works wonders. And I've had people who've even reversed their type 2 diabetes to a large extent, who've had gastric bypass surgery. But if you've only got a BMI of 30, it's not really going to work to go for gastric bypass surgery and then still go and eat what you want and do what you want.
I'm sketching something out here. My
What are you
hand's
sketching?
not the best, but I drew Paula's weight loss pyramid.
That's exactly it.
You should copyright this. We got
I
the
think it's already been copyrighted. I'm just paraphrasing it.
fundamental stuff at the bottom, the foundation, the behaviors, good sleep, stress management, attitude. I think just having good attitude, and then some of the the caloric balance stuff, the meal planning, but keeping the 4 out of the 5 thing in mind. It doesn't have to be optimized all the time. And physical activity. Physical activity is not just exercise; it's daily stuff throughout the day. Also, how much movement we get. And then we have the medical options, GLP-1s, SGLT2 inhibitors, even metformin. It has been found to help some people with weight management, and up here, different surgical options that people can take. So Paula's pyramid of weight loss. This is great.
That's exactly it. And you've got to target at all those levels in order to get anywhere. Yeah.
Copyright Paula Diab from South Africa. What town in South Africa are you from?
Durban. That's the main city.
Are you anywhere near the shore, near the coastline?
About 20 kilometers from the coastline. It's an extended city, and we stay on the suburbs on the outskirts.
Do you get your kids to the beach at all?
We do. My kids normally drag me to watch hockey and ballet and other things, which prohibits the amount of time that you can go to the beach. We nicely sort of halfway between the beach and the mountains and the bush. So it's very nice.
All right. I want a picture of you wrestling with a lion. That would be cool.
Really?
Maybe a baby lion. And you don't have to be wrestling with it. You can just be kind of cuddling it. How about that?
Can it be a fluffy toy lion rather?
A fluffy toy lion would do.
Because I don't think I'm going into the bush to go and cuddle a lion.
You're important. Well, thank you, Paula. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Gary.
I know it's morning here, but I think it's dinner time, almost dinner time there for you.
Almost dinner time.
Yeah.
The sun hasn't set yet. We actually got a beautiful sunset that I can see just out the window.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. On behalf of Think Like a Pancreas, the podcast, I'm Gary Scheiner. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone.